Call the Wednesday, June 19th, 2024 regular City Council meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, as you may. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, just for the sake of everybody here, I want to note that there's a change to the process for comments from the public this evening. And I think this will be the case moving forward. There will be two opportunities for members of the public to address items not appearing on the agenda. The early public comment period, agenda item number 1, will be limited to 10 speakers. Each speaker will be allowed up to 2 minutes. Speakers who do not have the opportunity to speak during this time will be allowed to make their comments under the later public comment, agenda item number 10. When we announce these agenda items, if you could please form a line so that we'll know how many folks we're going to have. That would be helpful. Be advised that these meetings are broadcast on KSVY, Zoom, and city website. And we ask that you be courteous. Turn off your cell phones, watches if they make noise, and while the meeting is in session. So we will call the regular meeting to order. There was no closed session. Could we have roll call, please?
Councilmember Ding.
Present.
Councilmember Lowe. Here. Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Here.
Councilmember Wellander.
Here.
Mayor Gurney.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. The first order of business this evening is a presentation. And this is a presentation recognition of Mr. Tom Haeuser.
Agenda approval. Agenda approval. Oh.
Correct.
Thank you.
I move approval of the agenda.
I was going to ask. Thank you.
I'll second that.
All right. Roll call.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
And now we will get to the presentation of recognition to Mr. Tom Haeuser for his service on the Sonoma County Library Commission. And I understand we have a presentation from the county, so please step to the podium.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff. I'm Erica Chabot, and I'm the library director, and I'm going to be brief because I'll probably get a little emotional. I just want to thank Commissioner Haeuser for his service to the library and for his wise counsel, his dry sense of humor, and his experience.
That's what I like, the dry sense of humor.
And I hope he will continue to work with the county library in whatever capacity he chooses, whether that's working as a volunteer or on the foundation or with the foundation.
Subtle hint.
That's right. And I'm Deborah Doyle. I'm the chair of the commission. Tom was my vice chair for 2 years. He was certainly on the commission before I arrived, so he taught me everything I knew. He taught me about the bylaws and all of those sorts of things. He's just a terrific guy. He's been devoted to the library for years and years and years, and we were so lucky to have him on the commission. And we know that he won't go far. And so it is your responsibility, I have to tell you, to find someone who can stand in on the commission for your wonderful town. So be thinking about that. It's not going to be Tom, but we're looking forward to someone who can maybe fill his shoes a little bit. But he's really been terrific to work with. And I'm sure he may have just a short something to say.
Very little.
Well, that's good, because we don't want to hear from you yet, Tom. We're not done with you. Anyway, so I don't think anybody actually said this. For 8 years, Tom served on the commission. representing the Sonoma Valley. And I have to say that during my time sitting with the Sonoma Valley Library Advisory Board, he certainly was always there and always informed and able to share information from the county perspective. So I certainly appreciated his work. And even before he joined the Library Commission, he did spend, I believe it was 8 years, with our Traffic Safety Committee, serving the local community here. So 16 years of public service.
Parks and Recreation, at least 8 years. That's when you had a Parks and Recreation Commission.
Okay. Yeah.
And then the first appointment was about 45, 48 years ago to the City Library Committee, which was before the city joined in with the rest of the county.
Mm-hmm.
He was an infant at the time.
Yes. Well, definitely
I was young.
somebody that's involved in the community, loves the community, and with that, I have a presentation for you before you can address everybody at large.
Haven't I done enough? She wants the picture.
Oh, everybody wants.
One more picture?
All of them, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to. I want to. I've already said too much, and you have a lot on your agenda always, and a lot of people to listen to. So listening to me say anything other than you have a very good library, having joined in with the county. It's a system that would not be possible if we hadn't joined with the county library system. And we need to keep that in mind. It's a good program, and it's well run right now. We're very happy with it. I feel very comfortable retiring from the commission. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Okay.
Mayor, can I say a couple of words?
Yes.
Yeah. In addition to your library commission, and also I would like to recognize and congratulate your retirement from the law office of the Mary and Robert and Tom. So you helping out in the community, protecting our neighbors and the people's and the interests and the right, and during the past decades. Thank you so much, and also enjoying your retirement time and turn over a new chapter for yourself. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the council? All right. Tom, you can take the rest of the day off.
I appreciate that.
All right. Now it's item number 2, comments from the public. And as I stated earlier, we will have 10 speakers. And I see we have number 1. So please take it away.
Is this open now? My name is Jim Bohar. I live here in town at 299 First Street West. It's about 300 feet down on the right side of First Street West. I want to take this opportunity to publicly thank the Transcendence Theater Group for the courteous way that they've treated my neighborhood and my neighbors. As you know, they were shunned from the plaza operation and were relocated out to the Field of Dreams right behind us here. Soon after that, we were notified by the management of Transcendence that they were concerned about the impact they were having on our neighborhood in terms of parking, congestion, noise. Most of our backyards and our patios are within earshot of the operation, as they were when the Jazz Festival was going on back there. So to compensate us for the inconveniences we were having, they offered every neighbor 8 free tickets, which we have in our pockets now, and we're pleased with that. Soon after that, we received this card in the mail with our tickets, further indicating their considerations. Talked about the dates of the 4 performances and the said details. During the times outlined in the schedule, noted by an asterisk, there will be amplified sound and potential light pollution to the surrounding neighborhood. So be ready for some noise or music. Next, there will be increased traffic during performances when patrons are present during the hours of 5:30 to 10:30 on the following days, and on the following roads will be affected, First Street East, First Street West being a couple of the streets. What's most final about this and conclusive is that they said, in case of any event mitigation, please contact the following in order of priority. Maggie Simmental, Operations Manager, gives a direct phone number.
Jim, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
So thank you very much.
All
I
right.
appreciate your time, and I want to thank Transcendence.
thank you.
Good evening. My name is Maria Barakat. I'm a Lebanese Sonoman with family who was ethnically cleansed from Palestine during the Nakba. I'm here tonight representing a legitimate community-driven human rights coalition, Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire. I'm also a core organizer with Sonoma County for Palestine, the Center for People Power, a union member with the largest union in the United States and the most forcefully pro-Palestinian union, UAW. I'm an appointed member of the Sonoma County Human Rights Commission and a member of Sonoma Valley Democratic Club. We ask that you put your resolution back on the agenda for the coming meeting and vote on it. Our coalition has conducted a by-the-book democratic campaign, lobbying our elected representatives to address a humanitarian issue that the city is directly related to. Nearly 200,000 federal tax dollars are collected from city residents, and they fund genocide and occupation annually. Our coalition has further held public rallies, hosted powerful education and cultural events. We've emailed you all repeatedly and been almost entirely ignored. But for those who would meet with us, we've had productive conversations. Regarding the thousands of emails that you received, it should be publicly noted on the record that these are coordinated by the National Jewish Community Relations Council. The templated emails are not from Sonoma Valley residents at large. They've collected no signatures. They've appeared at no city council meetings, and we do. The boards behind me represent the 550 petition signatures that we've collected from this valley, from residents in this town. We request that you respond to our organized coalition by putting the resolution back on the next meeting and hold it to a vote on the record. We further request that you consider 3 amendments to this resolution. Add that the city and council oppose anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and anti-Palestinianism, that you call for the release of all hostages, that you call for the end of offensive weapons to Israel. We ask that you hold the regular procedures to consider and discuss the resolution and proposed amendments from the coalition of your constituents. Thank you.
Next.
Good evening. My name is Marty Bennett. I'm a 30-year resident of the city. I speak on behalf of my union, Unite Here Local 2. Previously, I have conveyed to you that almost the entire labor movement has called for an immediate and permanent ceasefire. This includes the AFL-CIO, most international unions like Unite Here, NEA, UAW, SEIU, and the North Bay Labor Council. I'm asking you to please agendize the ceasefire resolution at the next meeting. But I want to take off my union hat and address you as a historian. I've taught American history for 30 years at Santa Rosa Junior College. There is a very long history of local government involvement in foreign affairs, particularly in the era of the imperial presidency, starting with Vietnam and the nuclear arms race, when power became highly centralized in the executive branch at the expense of Congress. The role of grassroots movements in countering an unchecked president is essential to our democracy. Cities have played a vital role. Just a few examples. One, between 1966 and 1971, there were a dozen city referendums on the Vietnam War. After 1968, all passed. Two, in the 1980s, 900 local governments passed nuclear freeze resolutions opposing the arms race. And 759 sister city agreements were made, many with cities in the Eastern Bloc, including Sonoma. These were intended to break down the political and cultural barriers between the U.S. and the USSR during the so-called Second Cold War. 3, in the 1980s, 26 states, 22 counties, and more than 90 cities approved economic sanctions, including divestment against companies in apartheid South Africa. Sonoma can do the same in turn exerting our influence on federal policy.
Thank you, Marty.
Tanya Marsh, 20-year resident here, almost, and a member of Sonoma Valley for a Ceasefire. Around the room, you can see over 500 people, actually 550 people now, represented. They are your constituents. Our grassroots human rights coalition spent the last 2 months gathering signatures from people in Sonoma. We went to farmers markets, we held events and made announcements. We raised almost $8,000 for mutual aid in Gaza at our fundraiser, where over 150 people came out and supported. We used word of mouth and networks to spread the word. We offered the Sonoma public a robust ceasefire resolution draft that includes the release of all hostages and the end of offensive military aid to Israel and a strong condemnation of hate, racism, anti-Semitism, and Islamophobia. 500 people in this town agreed that the resolution and certainly approved the one that you put forth last meeting. We ask that you acknowledge the community you serve, return the resolution to the agenda, and hold it to a vote. For anyone who hasn't signed, you can go to SonomaCountyForPalestine.com or Instagram at Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire in the petition, in their bio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ceasefire now.
Hello, my name is Mary Catherine Cutcliffe, and I've worked in the city of Sonoma for about 19 years, although I live just outside the city limits at 19550 8th Street East. Tonight I want to speak on behalf of the Sonoma garbage collectors. I know they hold a contract with the city and it is in negotiation. I understand that they have the lowest rates of all refuse disposal companies in the North Bay. John Corrado was telling me that they work to keep the rates low.
Mayor Catherine?
Yeah.
That's an agenda item for this evening. It will come up under public hearing. So if you can...
Wrong time.
Correct. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. So...
Hi, my name is Ariel. I live here on the unceded lands of the Coast Miwok. I'm a member of the Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire Coalition. Today is day 257 of the genocide in Gaza, and I share with you today an update of the latest conditions in Gaza, the latest stories that are breaking my heart. And I share these tonight so that we can bear witness collectively, and also so that the City Council can take note of what you stand for when you don't stand for a ceasefire and an end to the Israeli occupation. Israeli military attacks in Gaza have killed 24 people and injured 71 just in the last 24-hour reporting period, including a bombing in Nuseirat, in buildings housing displaced families. The injured were taken to a hospital that lacks fuel, medical supplies, and capacity. Another 9 were killed and 30 injured when Israelis attacked a group of people awaiting for aid trucks. 1 in 3 Palestinian children under the age of 2 suffer from acute malnutrition. Daily caloric intake is around 300 calories a day per person, and 50% of the population has completely exhausted their food supplies. In northern Gaza, there is a water crisis because Israelis have destroyed all of the wells, and meanwhile 68% of Jewish Israelis oppose humanitarian aid to Gaza. With the recent United Nations Commission report confirms Israeli authorities are responsible for war crimes, intentional attacks on civilians, and using starvation as a method of war. Over 37,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 7th, and as a reminder, there was no ceasefire on October 6th. There was apartheid, military occupation, forced displacement, and ethnic cleansing. I know that none of these statistics are easy to hear, and I know that the City Council places their personal comfort in high regard, but it's time to stop centering your own privilege, your own whiteness, your own personal fragility, and to start considering how you are connected to our broader humanity. And if you fail to see that, then truly you have lost the spark for what makes us human. Please put the ceasefire resolution back on the agenda.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lexi Bakar. I'm representing the Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire Coalition. I urge you, like the folks before me, to please reinstate the resolution that you all wrote to the agenda and please vote on it. We have gathered, like Tanya said, and Maria, over 550 signatures in support of a resolution, and this number continues to grow. Just since the last City Council meeting on June 5th, we've collected an additional 100 signatures. This is significant for our town's population and reflects widespread sentiment in Sonoma and the world. According to recent Data for Progress poll, 80% of Democrats, 57% of independents, and 56% of Republicans favor a ceasefire. In Sonoma County, 56% are registered Democrats and 17% are Republicans. This means that 134,000 out of 168,000 registered Democrats in Sonoma County support a ceasefire, alongside 30,000 out of 54,000 registered Republicans. Notably, the town of Sonoma has a higher proportion of Democrats, indicating very strong local support for a ceasefire. At the last City Council meeting, nearly 100 community members, including respected figures, voiced their support for the resolution, with only a few in opposition. I urge you to consider this data and the community's overwhelming call for action. Your constituents are asking for this, and this is textbook democratic process. Thank you.
My name is Celine. I'm representing the Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire Coalition. As we've said before, over 500 Sonoma residents signed this petition calling for our city council to adopt a ceasefire resolution. And a large portion of these constituents are young people, high schoolers, and college students. The incoming generations are asking you, how can we justify funding a genocide, slaughtering civilians with our American tax dollars? Our youth are facing a cost of living crisis, insurmountable college debt, unprecedented gun violence, and deteriorating public systems. And as I've mentioned here before, the carbon emissions caused by the thousands of bombs dropped on Palestine by Israel since October 7th will exacerbate climate change for every single person on this planet, including us youth in Sonoma. These tax dollars could be used to combat the very real issues we are facing at home, rather than arming the murder of over 38,000 Palestinians. We as young people are desperate for our representatives to recognize these concerns. This fight begins on a local level, where we, of over 500 of your constituents, are asking you to please hear our desperate calls and add this ceasefire resolution to the agenda. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Beth Hadley. I've been asked to come here tonight to represent the Sonoma Valley Democratic Club. We have over 150 members, and we had in our May meeting, the majority of members present voted in support of a ceasefire resolution. And I just want to read the last part of the resolution, which I have sent to our elected officials, President Biden and down. The Sonoma Valley Democrats calls upon our elected leaders to take major steps to bring about, 1, a permanent and immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the West Bank, 2, the immediate release of all Israeli hostages and Palestinian detainees and political prisoners, 3, a halt to offensive weapon sales and shipments to Israel, 4, the funding and immediate unobstructed entry of humanitarian aid and assistance into Gaza. Now is the time to take a stand. Your constituents are asking you to discuss this and vote on it, and I really hope you'll do that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Julian. I'm also here with Sonoma Valley for Ceasefire. It's important to note that today is Juneteenth, a day that reminds us how broad-reaching and embedded racism is in the American project, with resounding echoes today. Southern states kept it a secret that slavery had been abolished so that they could continue to exploit the free labor of Black people on their plantations and garner greater wealth. Local and state governments were complicit in explicit unfreedom again and again throughout history. Unfreedom is unfreedom. Here and everywhere we speak of liberation and freedom. We insist on liberation everywhere for everyone. Our siblings with the NAACP reminded us last meeting what racial equity will actually mean, and that means government must take tangible actions that create just realities for all. A resolution for human rights in Palestine is just that kind of action. Additionally, the NAACP recently called for Joe Biden to halt all weapons sales to Israel and advocated for a ceasefire and release of all hostages. This was not just a wishy-washy call for peace, but a proper call to stop giving weapons that continue this war and genocide, a true call to end this war. As Frederick Douglass once said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Thank you.
So we have one space left. Okay, somebody, please.
Okay, thank you. I didn't plan on getting up to say anything, but what everybody's saying is fine, a ceasefire, but does anyone have a plan on how to make Hamas agree to a ceasefire? They've sworn to kill all Israelis and all Christians anywhere in the world, and they're not about to, at least from what I hear, agree to a ceasefire or to release all their hostages. So I just wanted to let that be heard from somebody that it's not all Israeli that needs to agree to ceasefire. It's Hamas. Thank you.
All right. Okay, that concludes our public comment for the first part of the evening. I'm sorry, Mr. Eicher, I think you heard the guidelines for this evening, so you're welcome to speak at item number 10 on the agenda. So we will move on with the agenda, and right now, do we have any meeting dedications? Yes, Ms. Lowe.
First of all, just to recognize Juneteenth, the actual holiday, federal holiday today, and I saw many people with their families enjoying it, and that was great. And with great sadness, we learned of the death of Willie Mays yesterday, 2 days before a historic game was going to take place that commemorated what they called at the time the Negro Leagues, and the name of the Rick, what was the name of the ballpark that they're playing at? Anyway, it was. Thank you. It's in Birmingham, Alabama. Thank you so much. I've been watching it all, and all of a sudden it was like it went out of my head. Thank you so much. But it was so sad that such a amazing, not just sports hero, but just someone who was so kind and so impactful, and passed 2 days before something that was going to be really commemorating his life. So, I'm wearing my Candlestick Park T-shirt. Many of us braved the cold at Candlestick Park. I remember telling my kids, bring sleeping bags. It's freezing cold out there. And, it's just amazing memories. I know he's not really part of Sonoma per se, but he's touched so many people that I just think it would be great to dedicate this meeting, especially on Juneteenth, to Willie Mays.
All right. Thank you. Any other dedications? Seeing none, we will move to council members' reports and comments. And we'll start at my left. Mr. Ding.
Thank you, Mayor. Last Monday, that is June 17, I was attending Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability and Agencies meeting. This meeting was very important because we passed a lot of the resolution. First one is the SCI consulting the groups, Sonoma Valley Groundwater Sustainability Rate and Fees Adjustment for this coming year. Because in the last year, we set up, in the first time we set up the feed rate based on our estimation. But according to the past 1 year's investigation, we changed the consumption of the groundwater. And in this way, our income and getting dropped. So at the same time, we needed to make an adjustment for the rate. The increased rate is not significant, but we follow this logic and then set up the new fee for the new year. The second thing we approved the fee changes and adjustment. And the third one, that is a fiscal year 2024 to 2025, final budget adoption. And the fourth one, that is in a contract with the auditor. And number 5, that is in a contract for project and a management and action evaluation. And the last one, we passed the groundwater monitoring access and agreement and the easements. Also, this is a new agreement, and we hopefully, we can follow this agreement and gather the more services and the quality in the services from this agreement. That is the end of my report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Farrar-Rivas, would you like to report anything?
Yes, I have 3 meetings to report. So on June 6th, I attended the Sonoma Clean Power Board meeting. One of the things that we were discussing is the focus on transition to renewables, and that the state of California is relying heavily on offshore winds. But then also, depending on that, we'll need to address transition issues specific to that project. And the concern with Sonoma Clean Power is if those projects don't prove sufficient, is that there's not really a backup. And I think it's good for the public to know that Sonoma Clean Power has been working diligently to create enhanced geothermal systems at the geothermal zone, and that the belief is that there's significant amount of geothermal capabilities, not just in our area, Sonoma County. We are very, very fortunate to have a significant amount of opportunities there, but actually throughout the state. So that was one thing. The other thing is Sonoma Clean Power, this is pretty exciting, is applying for a $5 million grant for virtual power plants with a focus on low-income communities and DACs as well. And that will be matched with $1 million from Sonoma Clean Power themselves. The focus is on Roseland, Bellevue, and tribal areas. But I question, of course, what will happen, how much will there be a focus on Sonoma Valley? And we run into this issue all the time with the disadvantaged communities, how they're assessed and established. So they're done by a census tract versus block by block. So often that leaves out Sonoma Valley and also West Sonoma from qualifying for a number of grants. So that's why these are the areas they're focusing on. Although Sonoma Clean Power, with their matching grants, can use that to focus on low-income households and in Sonoma Valley and West Sonoma. And what it really is working is putting in the systems and smart thermostats into those houses. They also hired a CFO, which I think is great, because the CFO, because the current CEO, Jeff Cyphers, has been pretty much playing that role since the inception of Sonoma Clean Power. And so this will really be a significant move forward to be looking at other financial avenues to be able to leverage some of the assets that are available to be able to fund future projects. So the person that they hired has significant qualifications. So that's great news. Then on June 13th, on the behalf of Mayor Gurney, I attended the Sonoma County Mayor's Council in Healdsburg, and there was a presentation by the Sonoma Community Action Partnership, Sonoma CAN, organization that focuses on early childhood education. I think one of the things that the 2 points, there was many points, I won't list them all, but is their transition in their process to really look at versus for early childhood education on servicing the full family. And that by servicing the full family, you really help move these initiatives forward.
And I think that we can all agree on the importance of early childhood education and the science that supports the benefits to not only the children, but to families to providing those services. Those services are not provided by them directly in Sonoma Valley, and that was something that I want to meet with them and follow up and see how those services are mainly through our school district, but would like to see what more can be done here in the city of Sonoma and Sonoma Valley. Last but not least, today, I attended the meeting of the Sonoma's Commission on Women and Girls, their report of the status of women and girls in Sonoma County for 2023. To do that data, they use census data. I once again brought up the issue of census data versus block data, but they also have been doing actual interviews where they meet with people one-on-one, also meet with different community groups. And the goal is to really get a survey and understanding for women and girls in Sonoma County. Oh, they also rely on county and state and national data. But what are the key issues that women and girls are facing? And the 5 key issues that were presented was employment, actually there's 6, employment, education, food insecurity, housing, of course, quality, affordable housing, and the full range of housing for those that are unhoused as well, of course, mental health, and childcare. And childcare being a significant issue, especially for single-parent households. So that's it.
It's only 5.
It's only 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Employment, education, food security, housing, mental health, childcare. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lowe.
I attended my grandson's graduation from 8th grade from Fortuna High School. He got a 4.0. We'll be going on to, for junior high, be going on to Fortuna High, go Huskies. And also I'm working, so I apologize, was unable to attend any other meetings, but I sometimes like to say that I do have a family, and all of us do. And so it's important to connect with them, and sometimes you learn a lot just by looking at kids and listening to what they have to say. So apologize for not attending meetings, but family first sometimes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Wellander.
In the interest of time, I will only speak to one item, and it wasn't actually a meeting, but I would like to say that I did attend the farmers market on Tuesday, and again, very proud of that activity. I do have a request that we, besides dancing and enjoying the fruits of the vineyard, buy produce so that we keep a few of the actual produce vendors so that we can keep the name farmers market legitimate. So please buy produce. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. And while we're doing commercials, please go see Transcendence in the Field of Dreams. I attended on the 13th the Tourism Improvement District meeting, and essentially we adopted a status quo budget for the 24-25 fiscal year, and part of that budget will fund the necessary legal support to renegotiate the city's relationship, and that I think will probably even come up in our budget discussion tonight. But anyway, they're doing okay. Occupancy is pretty good, not great, but it's in progress. So, moving ahead, we will go to city manager comments and announcements.
Great, thank you, Mayor. A couple of updates. An update on the tree in the plaza. We had an elm on the plaza that looked like it was in declining health. So the staff cordoned off the area. You may have seen that. We cordoned off some parking areas and some picnic areas just to make sure that the public was protected. We did do an investigation into the tree, and we got the report back that is in stable condition, so it's good news. But we will be keeping an eye on that tree. We've opened up the area. It is safe to be around. And we'll continue to work on management of the area in terms of watering and how we manage the limb of the tree and holding those limbs up. So more on that, and we'll also talk a little bit about that in the budget as well, about how to, we're going to be looking at the plaza as a whole. Second, the ambulance that we are donating to Ukraine, we did an ceremony on that, I believe it was last week. And that volunteers from sister cities will be loading that up with supplies this weekend. And on Monday, it'll be picked up and then begin its journey to Ukraine. So that's going to happen on Monday. And then, as mentioned, Transcendence kicks off its inaugural stay here in Sonoma tomorrow night, and will run through the weekend. And they will be back for 3 more weekends in July, August, and September. So you can find information on the website about the dates and the other impacts. And we're encouraging everybody that goes to that to please go out and visit our restaurants, shop downtown before the show, and enjoy our downtown while you're here. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. And now the most informative part of the evening, generally, the city attorney comments.
I actually do have one comment this evening, some information about the California Business Roundtable measure. The Supreme Court has prepared an opinion, and it will be issued tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on their website. So we will have a lot more information about all existing revenue measures and potential future revenue measures throughout the state, and whether or not we need to deal with this measure going forward or not. So
All right.
That's my update.
Thank you.
All right.
Moving along, we have a consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council or staff request specific items be removed for separate action. So, here we are.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, roll call.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. And moving right along. Item number 8, public hearing. This is a public hearing and a resolution authorizing adjustments to solid waste utility rates and authorizing the city government to execute an agreement for solid waste collection services with Sonoma garbage collectors. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, and I'll introduce this item. This is the public hearing, as you mentioned, for our new garbage rates and our new contract with Sonoma Garbage Collectors. And I'm going to turn this over to Garth Schultz, who's with R3 Consulting, who assisted the city in negotiating this contract and bringing this forward tonight. So thank you, Garth.
Great. Thank you, City Manager. You saw me about 6 weeks ago. Garth Schultz, president with R3 Consulting Group. We're an outside consulting firm that works exclusively for municipal agencies on matters like these. We came in at the tail end of this process to support the city staff and Sonoma Garbage Collectors in reaching conclusion around the terms and conditions of a new agreement, extending the term for solid waste collection activities here in the city, and also having adjustments to rates to provide for new programs and services that are received by residents and businesses, and also in support of the city's compliance with state law SB 1383. Next slide, please. Oh, I can do it. Excellent. Fantastic. Although theoretically. All right, we're good. All right, this is what we'll cover. This is going to look very familiar. You've seen most of this content before. It's actually a bit more curtailed and summarized, and we will address a couple of different points relating to this evening's action. So the objective before you this evening is to conduct a public hearing, tabulate the number of written protests received subject to the notice that was mailed to all ratepayers here in the city regarding the adjustment to proposed solid waste utility rates. And if there is not a majority protest constituting 50% plus 1 of eligible ratepayers, you as the City Council may move forward with the recommended action. By way of background, once again, you contract with Sonoma Garbage Collectors for the provision of solid waste services. That means garbage, recycling, organics, or green waste, 3 streams that are in front of most homes and businesses throughout the city. It's also inclusive of other types of services that they provide, services at city events, city facilities, and others. SB 1383 you've heard probably a bit about over the course of the last several years, but it's a law requiring certain programs and services that be implemented by each jurisdiction in the city, or sorry, in the state of California. to remove organics from going to landfill and thereby reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help comply with the state's overall objectives to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And the agreement, staff started doing negotiations with SGC in mid-2023. The primary objective of those negotiations was to secure the programs and services for compliance with SB 1383, but also to implement and arrange for important updates to SGC's operations, customer service, field operations, and the like, and also extend provision of these services into the future. For all of that, of course, it does require some amount of additional change in compensation. So in terms of outcomes, you've heard this before. What's recommended before the council for adoption this evening, along with the rates, is a new agreement with SGC. It is a wholly new agreement that would replace the existing agreement with the company. It would be for a 10-year term, starting here very soon on July 1, going through 2034, mid-2034. Again, primary objective is those programs and services under SB 1383, which loosely contain new containers to match color requirements set by the state so that when you go to individual cities throughout the state, you're not confused about what goes where, and then lids and labeling and pictures effectively to let folks know what you put in each bin and what you don't put in each bin. There's requirements to close the loop if we're seeking as a state and as individual communities to get organics out of landfill and turn them into valuable products like compost. The state also wants to see demand for that compost, so the city is required to procure some amount of recycled organic waste product. You're getting a portion of that out of this agreement with SGC. And then there's other requirements to report and track data. There's a whole host of them. In fact, we're right in the middle of that right now because the state has come knocking. And so they are, and SGC is assisting in the city's efforts and being responsive to the state's requests for records, and to monitor what's going on in containers to make sure that folks are putting the right things in the right bins and not contaminating the waste streams, leading to more cost and less overall recovery. Importantly here, and you'll hear probably a little bit during the public comment from SGC representatives, they've been in the community for some time. It's been a multi-generational operation, and in being a multi-generational operation, it's also due for some upgrades to conditions of service. So part of what you're securing with this new agreement and the rates is vehicle upgrades, replacement to vehicles that are in service, and also a transition to the state-mandated transition to zero-emission vehicles, which is some ways off still, but there's commitments from them to work in that direction. Folks who will work with businesses and multifamily dwellings and the city to implement zero-waste programs and ensure that folks are putting the right things in the right bin and overall reducing their solid waste streams. Support for city collection events at various markets and other events hosted by the city and others. Changes in customer service, living wages for drivers and other operators, and a whole host of other industry standard best practices in the multiple pages of this agreement. In the end, part of what the subject of this evening's action is an adjustment to their rates. And the recommended and noticed rate adjustments are shown here on the slide. That is a 20% adjustment over the current rates, which went into effect of July 1st of last year. So you can see in the chart that say, I'm just going to pick the 32-gallon residential subscription level, which is shown 2 rows down. It's the most commonly subscribed to size for solid waste collection service. As a reminder for the council and those listening and the public, you pay for your solid waste services based on your garbage collection size, but that's inclusive of all of the services you receive: recycling, organics, bulky item pickup, other items as well. So you can see that's going from $22.91 a month to $27.49 a month, which is a monthly change of under $5, around $4.50, $4.58 to be precise, and you can see the others here on the slide. Now, it's important to understand that we arrived at this outcome through negotiations. Our company did a thorough review of SGC's current financial position, their financial projections about what it would take to implement the new programs and services that they're committing to in the agreement. So we did a really thorough analysis to come to a conclusion around the fitness of this rate adjustment for what you receive as a city and what your residents and ratepayers would receive as a city. We provided our advice to staff over the course of that time, and ultimately we came to the conclusion that an adjustment was necessary to cover the new cost of providing these new services, that the rates aren't more than necessary to cover those new services, and importantly here, you as a city still remain very competitive and comparable in relationship to others here in Sonoma County, which in and of itself is pretty competitive and comparable to much of the rest of the Bay Area. If you ever look at rates in other parts of the Bay Area, they tend to be a bit higher than we see here in Sonoma County. And they're fair to ratepayers, and they also provide a fair return to the company. So here's what that looks like. A lot of detail on this slide, but we are trying to give a full picture of what ratepayer experience will be compared to today. So I'll direct your attention to the very far left of this chart, which shows your current rates for, in blue, the very smallest container that's offered to residents, the 20-gallon garbage can, and then in orange, and this is how the slide is ordered, is an ascending order of the orange rate, which is the common 32-gallon size, the middling size, and then you can see as you go further back in the chart, the gray for the larger 64-gallon, and the yellow for the larger, even still, very large 96-gallon. So today, on the whole, you are amongst the lowest overall rates in the incorporated communities, which makes you amongst the lowest overall in Sonoma County. And then for at post, if you accept the recommendation this evening, you'll still be amongst the very lowest, with only Cotati being potentially lower, although they'll likely have some sort of adjustment at some point in time in the future. So you still compare favorably after the adjustments. So with respect to the action tonight, your next steps are to conduct the public hearing, count the written protests, and then if no protest exists, you may move forward with the recommended action should you choose. And again, that's for both adoption of the rates that have been duly noticed to ratepayers, and then directing the city manager to execute the new agreement with the company, which would take effect just a couple short weeks away on July 1st of this year. And with that, should you have questions, I'm here. I'm joined by my colleague, Alex Soulard, who also has done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the review of the agreement that's a part of your packet this evening. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Any questions from the council? Yes.
So I have one question regarding when the actual tabulation of protest votes, what date that ends? Is that
This
July?
evening.
This evening.
This evening,
So it ends,
correct.
so as of tonight, and we haven't tabulated them yet, or we know?
I believe that'll be something your city clerk will report out on. You tabulate them at the culmination of the public hearing this evening.
At the end of the public hearing, we will tabulate the protest. So
Oh,
the
great.
deadline is when the mayor closes the public hearing.
Oh, great. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification. And having not done that before. But so then the other question I have is, I noticed, and I did scan through most of those, I forget how many pages there were, but there was a lot of pages to that agreement. And I noticed that there's nothing that deals with hazardous waste. And I'm assuming that that's not part of this agreement. But at some point it would be good to know, what are the services that are provided for customers to be able to deal with. I just had a personal issue where I realized closing down my mother-in-law's house, and she had like 5 jars of nail polish. So very big, and so realized that it's hazardous waste.
Not your color.
No, it's nail polish remover, sorry.
Oh,
Plus nail
remover.
polish, the remover and the nail, there's a lot. And so I was looking, I realized they're hazardous waste. I don't think most people realize that nail polish remover, or the remover, that it's, a lot of people throw it down their drains. Anyway, so just, it'd be good to know at some point how those services are provided.
And it's not part of this agreement, you are correct, and the reason why is that those services are provided at a regional scale through Zero Waste Sonoma. and there is a facility, and I'm sure that the information it already exists on their website, and I know there's brochures, but I'm certain that that can be shared through to the council. And Mayor, if you don't mind, I just had one point that I forgot from my presentation, which was there was a comment when we were here back in early May when you directed staff to issue the Prop 218 notices. There was a question around in what ways will the agreement ensure that both the city, with the support of SGC, will meet the mandates under SB 1383 and the increasing expectation of getting organics out of the landfill. And there was a question, I think it came from a public commenter, around how will this help support, say, the state's goal of 75% diversion, which I think was also conveyed as a mandate that then trickles down to the city, which is not actually correct. So the ways in which this agreement does this is there's been a shift in tone over the last 5 or 6 years since SB 1383 has been put into place, and we're no longer focused as a community, a solid waste industry and community, around a percentage diversion, right? How much of what we dispose or generate as waste as a community, how much of that's getting recycled versus not recycled? While a valuable metric, there's been some real limitations to it, and the state is aware of that. So the state has been the reason being is our pie, how much we generate as people, as individual consumers, as businesses, has continued to increase. Part of that's the Amazon effect. Part of it's just shifting packaging patterns from manufacturers, over which we here in the city of Sonoma don't have control. So the focus has been away from, say, achieving a certain diversion percentage towards implementing specific and required programs and services to ensure that organic have the least possible chance of going into the landfill. And this agreement does that in spades. So we have addressed that, and I just wanted to make sure that that was known by the council, because it was a comment that was raised in the last meeting.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just a couple of questions. There were two different numbers that identified the requirement for filling, for pickups for 30 community events. And there was one for 30, and then later on in the body, it talked about 55. And it talked about eligible special events. So I'm just wanting to know, are we counting on 30, or are we going to get 55?
That is a great question, and I'd have to pull that up in order to be able to answer specifically.
Page numbers?
Page 169 is the 55, and page 143 is the 30.
Councilmember, if you don't mind, maybe if we take another question, and while we
problem.
look that up, and we can get back to you on it.
My second question has to do with the pickup of waste within our downtown core, and specifically with the plaza. I can't speak that what I'm about to say is industry standard, but I know that there is a collecting company that's over in El Cerrito that the boss has basically told the guys driving the trucks, if you drive down a public street and you see garbage from your truck, stop and pick it up. That kind of resonated in a very positive way, recognizing that we have a fairly small downtown and we have that plaza. So I would love to at least have discussion about that being an expectation for the city of Sonoma.
Excellent. I think that's noted, and perhaps we can have the company and their comments respond to that. I can't recall off the top of my head if we have that sort of explicit expectation highlighted here in the agreement. Certainly operationally, that may be feasible. It's also the kind of thing where if it's not in the agreement this evening, that could be either considered for a future amendment or just frankly a practical administrative solution to a problem. And thank you for raising El Cerrito. I spent 8 years there and know that operation very well.
I think for now, that's all I have.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Yes.
Mr. Dan?
Thank you so much. I fully support this 10 years agreement, and also rate changes increase that is necessary. So being on the local and waste management in the company, I'm wondering, and if you have more opportunities, and in cooperated with the other service providers and get together. For example, the ecology. Because recently, at the beginning of this year, they opened a new branch that is so-called Sonoma Marine and ecology in Santa Rosa. They invest in $35 million. They are using most advanced technology to sorting and the wastes. So right now we have the traditional waste and management industry already from the treatment to the resource recovery. So I'm wondering if our local company can, because we are not a competitor each other, different area, but they do have a lot of the good technology. Maybe we can share each other. Our former city council member and Mayor Logan Harvey right now is the general manager over there. And at the beginning of this year, I got a chance to got a site visit over there. Also, because he still lived here, we can take this opportunity and closely work with them as a partner and how to improve our waste management and how to we adapt a new concept from the traditional waste management to resource and recovery. This kind of a new concept. Yeah.
And this agreement, no, does not implement any sort of partnership between your operator, SGC, and Recology. I can't speak to whether that's something the company is contemplating, as I'm not with the company, or you're a consultant in this space. So I think the comments noted, but no, this agreement does not contemplate a direct partnership between SGC and Recology. They can speak to whether they forecast anything like that, though I will note from my experience in the industry working in this space, that will come around if there's a specific necessity, say for SGC to partner with Recology in use of their facilities. To my knowledge, that hasn't been necessary to date, but it is certainly something they could explore at a future date.
Oh yes, I totally agree. But what I mentioned, what I know the folks on that, because we have the contract is not in a couple of years, that is at 10 years. So we should consider this kind. We're not affected on the rate, we're not affected at our agreement, but in some way we'll change out in the future and waste management the methods. Yeah.
Thank you for the comment. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Wellander.
On page 143, you're talking about updates, and one of the things you identify is enhanced customer services, and it says the new agreement will include industry standard performance expectations. And maybe in the rest of the body may have been more explicit, but I'd love to just have you verbalize a little bit what these expectations might be.
So there's, one example would just be the fact that this agreement includes administrative penalties with respect to, say, things like missed pickups, spills, and the like. Those weren't present in your prior agreement, and so that level of specification around the ways in which they conduct their operations and their customer service are spread throughout the entirety of the agreement and represent an overall enhancement over the current agreement, which has been amended multiple times and is frankly not up to today's legal, professional, and programmatic standards. Also, Councilmember, with respect to your prior question, it does look like in the section that you referenced, it is intended to be 30 throughout that entire section. Previously, it had been 55 community events. Through negotiations, that was revised to 30, and it looks to me like it just didn't carry through that section. So that would be a change prior to execution.
Thank you.
Ms. Lowe.
Just I wasn't planning on asking questions or comments because I'm wholeheartedly in favor of this. And I just wanted to say that my experience as far as the administrative support has been excellent. Anytime I miss, my tree covers the garbage can and they miss it or something like that, someone comes by, takes care of it. I changed the size of my garbage cans. They prorated it, happened immediately, picked up the phone. I mean, it's just completely seamless and excellent service, and respond to emails quickly. And I compare that to my daughter's service, which is through Recology up where she lives, up in Humboldt County, where I just got back from. And I am still in dispute. I've been helping her with her bill over a month and a half with a check that I sent, and, it's also a small town. Fortuna is not that big. And, the amount of customer service that she's receiving compared to this customer service that I receive here is night and day. So I would like to just compliment our current provider, and, before we go wishing for something else, be grateful for what we have. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments?
Go ahead.
Ms. Farrar-Rivas.
Yeah, I too really appreciate the service, and I really appreciate the upgrades. And in that light, I agree with Councilmember Ding in regards to, I realize it's not in this contract, but just the idea industries change kind of methodologies and overall thinking, and that transition from waste management to resource and recovery.
Yes, resources, zero waste Sonoma, something
Yeah.
the concept.
And-
a world without no waste. A world without waste, that isn't it.
And just to know that, that you hear that, who we have a contract with, that people are very concerned about, that we're looking at this in a way that moves towards zero waste as much as possible. So if you would like to comment on that, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay. I too like our garbage service. I moved into town from the county and my garbage rates dropped 50%, so I was thrilled. And they are very reliable. Having said that, do we want to hear from the provider, Sonoma Garbage? And hopefully you can address some of those hanging questions out there, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Gurney, fellow council members, city staff. My name is John Lignito. I am the Chief Operating Officer at Sonoma Garbage Collectors. I had the pleasure of having the opportunity to come and work with the Corrado family here. I'm a second generation Recology employee. My father was with Recology in San Francisco. And I was afforded an opportunity to come here and serve a very wonderful community, but also continue the customer service and the overall service expectations of the Corrado family in itself. I remember the first thing that it was told to me when I started here is we're all about customer service. That's what we sell, is customer service. And that's something that's really stuck with me throughout my journey here. I've been here for about a year now. And what I can tell you is that having the opportunity to come in and work for a company that truly does care for the community that it serves has been an amazing blessing in disguise. I came from a corporate environment and didn't know what to expect, but I can certainly tell you that it's been a pleasure of mine to be able to do that. A few of the things that, they had tasked me to do is kind of improve upon the business that the great business that they've been servicing with the community, and find ways to create efficiencies, find ways to hit the state mandates with the SB 1383 and everything else that's coming along with those. We've been diligently working together for the last year to hit those, and also to come up with creative ways that we can best service the community with the most, the limited amount of rate impact to the customers that we serve. Now, I'm sure you've seen the trucks that have been out there and seen some of the older fleet that we've had, and that's something that we desperately needed to take care of. And part of this agreement is that accomplishes, but also being able to provide to continue to provide optimal customer service. A few of the things that have kind of come up with customer service, how we're going to be improving that platform. So I've been tasked with improving our website, getting it up to date, to getting it more interactive with the customers and having a more user-friendly website, as well as improving upon our phone systems where we actually have tracking that we can track the calls that come in, the types of calls that we get, if it's missed pickups, if it's service issues related, whatever it may be, we have metrics that we can provide to the city to be able to have those reports. And as well as something that I'd like to share is that, Waste Zero is, certainly the going of the times, and making sure that we adhere to that is a very important thing to me. My dad was actually the one who started the first compost route in Recology when they first ran it out of San Francisco. And so I'm very familiar with how we do those things and how to continue to do that and improve upon those things. And so we are diligently working with the Napa Recycling Center, the station that we use for disposing of our recycling and our organics material. They, as well as similar to what Recology has, they have very similar, if not the same types of equipment to go through the sorting and food waste and recyclable materials, which we provide in our reports, at our yearly reports for our diversion reports and whatnot. And in terms of what we're trying to bring to the table, it's one of these things that with the rates and how things have been going, we just want to be able to do what's best for the community here. And that's our goal, is that we can be able to provide the community with the best service possible, and any issue that we can help with the city and partner with the city. We look at this as a partnership, not as a contract. We look at it as a partnership that we're working with the city to continue to improve every year after. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Before you step away, anybody have a question for John? All right. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mayor Gurney, fellow council members, staff. Thank you again for having us. We are really excited about the next chapter, excited about having John part of the team with his experience, taking it to another level. And obviously Ken's been working with us in the city for a long time. We've been tasked over the last year to really put together a comprehensive program, and we've worked hard with the staff to do that in R3. I don't know if you've seen, we put a new truck in service 3 weeks ago with a new paint scheme. We have another one coming next week. Those trucks, compared to the older ones, we can get a better legal payload. We can carry more. The 3-axle trucks can carry 51,500 pounds. These can carry 57,500 pounds. Also, if you notice, there's an extra tag axle in the back, which allows us to shorten the wheelbase, gives us a lighter front end, safer on our streets, better wear and tear. And just to point out, some of the questions on the customer service side, definitely, the phone systems being able to track, give reports on if there are complaints. We do have part of this program is technology on the trucks. Just wanted to share, last week we had a customer send us an email that our truck knocked over a motorcycle parked on the street. The neighbor saw it. We were able to pull the footage up, and we were servicing across the street, and there's footage of a car driving past, hitting the motorcycle. So, we were able to provide that footage to the customer, which in return we, asked them if they wanted to share it with the police department. So, just a lot of really good things that we're putting forth. And just to touch on, some of the conversations about the technologies and stuff. We have a great relationship with other haulers, including Recology, Napa. The technology in Napa, like John said, is state of the art. And we're excited about those relationships because we're not investing in a $36 million facility. We have options, and it helps keep the costs down for the residents. We're not committed. And at some point, would love to take you all over there and see the facility. It's really impressive. So we're able to really take advantage of a lot of state-of-the-art technologies. And just excited about the next chapter and the opportunity to continue to serve this great city.
Okay.
Any questions?
All right, seeing none.
Thank you.
I will just make one comment. The facility in Napa, we had a presentation at our morning Rotary Club, and it is very state-of-the-art and amazing what they're doing over there. So I encourage a field trip if anybody's interested. Please.
Very briefly, Mayor, council members, I'm Ken Wells. I've been supporting Sonoma garbage collectors since about 2008 as a consultant. Before that, I was the executive director of Zero Waste Sonoma, which was then called Sonoma Waste Management Agency. But I want to add just one piece of information. We were talking a little bit about the other facilities in the area. The organics that are generated in the city of Sonoma go to the Napa composting facility. All the other composting collection or the organics collection programs in the city, in the county, go to a variety of different facilities around the north, south, and east in order to deal with it. The reason I'm bringing this up is that the Napa facility is beyond state-of-the-art in my mind. They're actually collecting biogas from their compost. They're composting. They're doing it all on site. We don't have to drive all over the North Bay just to get our organics into compost. And it mentioned just briefly, there's going to be giveaways. We'll be providing compost to the community. We'll be making arrangements with the city to do that. And we're happy to be able to provide that Napa compost, the Sonoma compost that goes to Napa, come back to Sonoma and be used locally. And I just wanted to add the part about the compost because that's important to me, the whole that end of the thing. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. It's a public hearing.
This is the public hearing, and so if anyone has written protests, this is the time to also be bringing your written protests forward, if any.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Good evening. I'm Tony Mall, 835 Knight Street. Just want to applaud this. I after reading through it, one of my lovely things I get to do in the evening. I think it's really important. As in my family, we have 2 small businesses in town to continue to work with small businesses that are locally owned and families that support the valley. So I think it's great, it's reasonable, and just to echo Councilmember Lowe, I had an issue with one of my garbage cans and made one phone call and got it switched immediately. I mean, that's what it's all about, and working with businesses here in this valley. So that's all I got to say. So definitely for it.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to? MJ. MC. Wrong M.
Thank you for inviting me back up or allowing me to speak again. I'm Mary Catherine. Catherine Cutcliffe. I've worked in the city for about 19 years and have lived outside of the city limits, but I do live at 19550 8th Street East. Tonight I want to speak on behalf of the Sonoma garbage collectors. I know that they hold the contract and it's up for negotiation. Maybe I'll skip some of the stuff that we've talked about, but I can say this. When I talked to John Corrado on the phone the other day, I asked, do your employees live locally? And he said, yes, they do. And I find that very fascinating and wonderful since this is an expensive place to live. So I applaud them for paying living wages for their employees. The Corrado family are 4th-generation haulers. I'll skip a little bit. I'll say this. When I was reading my comments to one of my colleagues at the community center earlier today, she said, they're local, they're hyper-local. And I said, yes. So as an event producer, I appreciate the community support that the Sonoma Garbage Collectors has provided. I've contracted with them for large events like the Film Festival, 4th of July, and City Party. With each of those contracts, they gave us a discount, knowing that it was a nonprofit-produced community event. And I appreciated that discount. But I also appreciate that they've been a resource to me when I had a question about sorting. So my questions were answered. One night during film festival, somebody was throwing away wine glasses, and I thought, you're not supposed to put wine glasses in the glass recycling bin. And so I reached out to Sonoma garbage collectors, and I got a call about 8:30 that night from John Corrado confirming that, yes, wine glasses do not go in the glass recycling bin. And that saved us a ding. We would have been charged for poor sorting. So I appreciated that. When we started Trash and Fashion at the community center 15 years ago, they were one of the first sponsors to step up. And this year, we again received a sponsorship check from the Sonoma Garbage Collectors. They may not be the largest sponsor that we have, but they've been on board longer than any other sponsor. Recently, we were undergoing am I out? Okay, well, they recycled our cubicles from the office. So right now, the old cubicles that we were going to throw out and trying to find a home for them at the community center, they are now in their new offices, and we appreciate that we saved them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And I guess this is the time when we need to ask whether there was any protest received.
I did receive 4 eligible protest letters, and I received one that was not eligible. So.
All right, thank you. So that doesn't meet the
That
threshold.
does not meet the threshold for a majority protest.
All right, then I will bring this back to the council for a motion would be lovely, unless there's more comment. Yes.
Excuse me, I do have just a few quick comments, and this is more programmatic, but I know we've been putting forth effort to involve young folks in our community, and I'm going to say it before, I'd love to see us engage high school kids in the climate club, because this is a real great opportunity for getting involved in something that has meaning in terms of educating the community on how to sort things. I am, in light of the fact that we just spent in excess of $160,000 on beautiful new trash cans in the plaza, there was a comment in the body that said that you would provide some additional containers, and I would like to just, in a very generic way, say no ugly containers. And I can also say that I've actually used the compost product from the Napa Yard, and from a landscape perspective, I think it's just great. And lastly, I think they've been extremely modest. I do believe that there's a certain degree of family fame in terms of designing something that I guess in the industry might legitimize John Sr. to go into the Collectors Hall of Fame. Is that true?
All right, thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Motion?
All right.
Anything?
I just,
Oh, yes,
yeah,
please.
just wanted to make sure, based on the discussion previously, that the motion would include an amendment to section 5.11C.
Section 5.11
C. That the references to 55 would be changed to 30 community events.
To change to 30. Okay, I would like to make a motion to move with the adjustment just our city attorney mentioned, and the section 5.11C, and also we change the number from the 55 to the 30. I would like to move to adopt the resolution, authorize the proposed adjustment to the rates for solid waste utility service, and authorizing the city manager to execute the proposed agreement for solid waste collection service with the Sonoma Garbage Collectors.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Very quick in there. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
With enthusiasm, yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right, very good. All right, moving ahead. Item 9.1, appointment of the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission. City Clerk Barr.
Yes. So over the last few months, the council's been very active in filling their seats on the various commissions and committees. At this time, we have one seat remaining, and that is on the Design Review and Historic Preservation Commission. It is one at-large position. This position can be filled by either a Valley member or a city member. We have received, we had 3 applications on file, and we received 1 additional. And so we're bringing these forward this evening for the council to appoint 1 individual to serve as the at-large member on the DRHPC. And the council, if they choose to do this, would do this by a majority vote of the council. And with that, if you have any questions, that's all I have for right now.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Seeing one. Mr. Wellander.
Just a quick one on the gentleman for Scott Cohen. Under the topic, he was applying originally for pros, and then it says other interest, absolutely, but it wasn't definitive, absolutely design review. Or, I mean, was caught my eye that it didn't identify that he had interest in. This is the next cover sheet.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at it. I know because he turned in his application in the original round, and I know we did contact them to see what other commissions and committees that they were interested in serving. And so at that time, we had confirmed with him.
Okay, thank
you. All right.
I'd like to make a motion to nominate Daniel Sohn. He recently reached out to me. He has a lot of history with, he's been a city council member himself and worked on various other groups, including a lot of with the Chamber of Commerce. He's just really wanting to get involved in the Valley. Certainly has a lot of experience, and he was here earlier and unfortunately had to leave, but he attended the meeting, which I think speaks highly for someone who is interested and has attended these meetings as well. So I'd like to move his name forward as a potential, should there be a majority vote, Mr. Sohn.
All right. Do we have a second for Mr. Sohn?
I would like to second.
We have a second. Vote.
Public comment on?
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment. Thank you.
I wasn't going to speak at this, except you missed public comment almost, so thank you. Though I would just say, since this position is open for someone outside of the city, that you look at a candidate from outside the city if they're qualified, of course. So thank you.
And to clarify, Mr. Sohn lives outside the city limits. He lives in El Verano area.
Anybody else in the public wishing to comment? Seeing none, we have a motion, a second, and a roll call, please.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowe.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
All right.
And one brief comment. I'm going to put a plug in now that you've filled all of the city committees and commissions. We do have 3 seats on some of our regional committees that we would love to get some applications for. Those are the, as we heard, filling Mr. Haeuser's position on the Sonoma County Library Commission, as well as the Sonoma County Sustainable Groundwater Management Advisory Committee. and the Sonoma Valley Community Advisory Commission. Those all have openings, so we would love to see some applications. One thing I will say is that the Sonoma County Sustainable Groundwater Management Advisory Committee, they are required to be a qualified elector of the city. So that is something that if this, the council would like to look at moving forward and making a change to that, we'd have to bring that forward, so.
Ms. Lowe, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so I was looking at those, and my understanding is that the Sonoma Valley SVA, which, Community Advisory, thank you, so I don't know what it is today. Mercury in retrograde, it's not firing. That person has to be a resident of the city, if I recall. So, you know, and, you know, to the point made earlier, some of them require us to do that. So, so we'll have to do that. With regard to the groundwater sustainability thingamajig, are you suggesting that we can change our procedures and make it like our other ones and get rid of the qualified elector piece? And why didn't we do that when we were doing that with all of the other ones? Is there a reason why that one wasn't included?
I can't really say other than we were focused on the city commissions and committees at that time.
Okay.
Yes, you can change it because it was a vote of the council to keep that as a qualified elector when they first initiated that advisory group. It was the council's decision at that time. They took a vote, so the council now could make that as a resident.
Well, I would like to, with the mayor's agreement, move forward in aligning all of our committees and commissions so that anyone who is a resident of the valley could be considered regardless of whether or not they happen to be a registered voter. Because there are many people from, and I've said this during the original conversations, there are many reasons why someone is not a registered voter. And we should not, although I want everyone to be a registered voter, let's be clear, there's, you know, people are working through the process. And, you know, we shouldn't, and it takes a long time. So I think that in the meantime, they're serving the city and they should be, if they're interested, we should be able to consider them. So I'd like to sort of wholesale bring that back as a policy change and then go forward and see if we can find candidates, if that's
Yeah.
okay.
So the council,
agree, yeah.
is there consensus to do that?
Yes,
All right.
agree.
So staff has direction and you'll do the recruitment as necessary.
I have a quick
Yes.
question. So just to be clear, so we're clear, so SVCAC, city appointment, and the other thing I wanted to say about that one, the reason why I think it does make sense that it's a city appointment is because other members of that
Yes,
commission
represent a
are
different-
representative of other areas in the valley.
Yeah.
So, and I represent the city, but I'm not a voting member. I'm just there ad hoc, not ad hoc. There's another term for it, whatever that
Are they-
is.
but
And then.
Yes, how many,
Can I
you
just
know?
finish my question?
Yes.
Just very quick. So the groundwater, does that need to be city or valley? That's,
That will need to change, and if I remember the language exactly, it has to be part of the water, that district of the water. I think it's District 1. I'd have to look at the map. There's something, the bylaws of the advisory committee actually has something. It's the lines of the water agency area, which are outside, they're actually outside of the city, so it would just have to be those
within
lines.
that district of the water district. And then the library commission.
The library commission, actually, the bylaws say that it has to be a Sonoma County resident.
Okay. Sonoma County. Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm so glad that we just have all these different.
It will be nice to make it consistent. It will be very nice.
All right. You have what you need? Yes. Oh, and Jack, you,
Yes, I totally agree, you know, we
welcome other interested residents and join this kind. Because I feel like the more and more on the local residents wanted to participate in these kind of the commission or the work, we need to encourage them. And as to SV and the CACs, yeah, just like Patricia mentioned, we shouldn't focus on the city, the residents, because of the rest of them and part they already regional. For example, Alvarado and the north part of the valley and the south end of the valley, they already should be within the city limit. Yeah. As to the groundwater sustainability agencies advisory commission, I would like you to double check with an agency and see what kind of the requirement for the candidates and the residents. Maybe you're on the right, but we need to double check. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. And we'll move on. Now, before we begin this exciting discussion on budget, does anybody need to take a brief break? Seeing none.
Better be exciting.
Item 9.2, discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve the fiscal year 2024-25 City of Sonoma operating and capital improvement budget with a number of resolutions. And we'll take them one by one eventually. Mr. Goodall.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And we will keep this moving and keep it exciting. This is our second discussion about the 24-25 budget. As you remember, we held a study session, a full-day study session a couple weeks ago, where we got input from the council on potential changes and modifications, and we'll go over that on what's changed since that day when we held that was May 30th to today. We're bringing this forward for adoption. The agenda today we're going to move through is we're going to talk about revenue projections. I think that's key for framing the discussion and move forward. The budget impacts on what's driving this budget. Overview of the current general fund budget and what we're seeing coming down the road. That's where we'll spend most of our time today, is the budget overview and next steps that we should take. We'll talk about the personnel, our community fund program, homeless funding, community partners, CIP, and then end with the next steps and adoption of the budget if the council wants to move forward with this. I do want to acknowledge Steve Montano from Baker Tilly, who's with me. Baker Tilly stepped in to help us out to get this budget to this point while we were in the process of hiring a finance director. We have since hired a finance director. Prapti, who is here in the audience today, has jumped in and has helped us out over the past few weeks in our first few weeks on the job. So she's already been a big help to us on getting this completed. And I also want to recognize Ryan, who's here as well, who's done a huge, heavy lift in the finance department to manage the data, review the data, get all the reports developed that you see in this packet. So we have a team working on this to bring this to you today. So it has taken some time. We started back in April. This is an expedited timeline. Next year we're going to start a lot earlier, and so you'll see us talking about the budget a lot earlier next year. We have moved through the budget review. I've reviewed it, made some changes. We presented this in a study session, as I mentioned, on May 30th, and we're back here tonight for the adoption process. And the goal is to adopt prior to the end of the month, so we can have a budget going on to July 1 of next year, or this year. I do want to reiterate that this budget was created based on the input from council and the development of the council goals that you established in February of this year, which was housing, economic development, revenue stewardship, parks, recreation, community services, climate mitigation, adaptation, and unification annexation discussions. So I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to Steve to talk about the revenue assumptions and why we're assuming what we're assuming that will drive the rest of this conversation.
Thank you, David. So there are a number of economic factors at play that are impacting not only your budget, but those budgets of your neighbors, neighboring cities, and cities throughout California. Inflationary pressures have put consumers kind of pulling back from discretionary expenditures. consumers have a choice to travel, to dine out, things of that sort, buy things. And we're witnessing, economists are telling us, a sort of pullback from that. And that sort of sets the context for what we're seeing in all three of your top revenue sources. Let me advance this. Which include transient occupancy tax, property tax, and sales tax. So just going to start with some trend analysis. Here we look at transient occupancy tax trend and a projection. So hotel demand growth across the entire state, including Sonoma, has been down, and this includes your occupancy rate, average daily rate, and revenue per available room, especially because of 2 hotel renovations in your city, and coupled with a drop in travel, we expect a decrease in fiscal year 24. And from there, we anticipate moderate revenue increases over the next 5 years. Moving on to property tax. We see that high interest rates have created a downturn in the real estate cycle that started in the spring of 2022. Lower home sales coupled with a flattening of sales prices and has resulted in lower anticipated property tax revenues again in FY24. So we're conservatively projecting moderate growth in property taxes in FY25 and the years that follow. That's probably your strongest growing revenue source looking forward. Moving on to sales tax. As we've said before, high interest rates have increased the cost of goods and services. This has impacted or negatively impacted your sales tax revenue in FY24 as consumers have pulled back, as I said earlier, on their discretionary spending. You see, again, more moderate growth than you've seen, especially exiting COVID. There was a lot of federal stimulus. People were spending a lot in those months or a couple of years in the aftermath of COVID. So you see that spike in those purple bars, and that's also true of TOT. But now things are kind of moderating a bit and slowing down for the reasons I just stated. And so we're just sort of conservatively projecting growth in all three of your top 3 revenue sources. David?
Thank you, Stephen. I'll just mention that as Steve mentioned early on, the approach that you just saw here in terms of projections are similar to what other cities in the county are taking in terms of addressing sales tax growth. That's probably one of the major drivers for most cities in terms of their revenue. And when you combine our sales tax with our local measure, it does make up a large portion of our revenue source, which you'll see in a future chart. So what's impacting this budget going forward? Unfortunately, we have a lot more negative impacts to our budget than positives, and that's going to result in a deficit that you heard about in this during the study session, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But just to reiterate some of the items that are impacting our budget and what's driving that deficit. First is, as Steve mentioned, the decrease in our revenue projections, particularly sales tax and TOT, and taking a conservative approach to how we're budgeting for those revenues coming in over the next few years. Our CalPERS unfunded liability, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I have a slide on that. We discussed that during the study session as well in terms of that increase that we're seeing this year, which is much bigger than it was in previous years due to some losses in the market in the previous, I think it was 2022. We've also had significant increases in our contracts with public safety, primarily police. Our contract increased a little over $800,000, and our fire contract increased as well. Fortunately, that was offset slightly by the first green dot, which was the passage of Fire Tax Measure H. And that allowed funding from Measure H to pay for the three new firefighters that we were picking up with the general fund, and we'll also pick up some of the fees we'll pick up the REDCOM fees that are another line item in our budget that we pay for. One other addition to the budget that is impacting the budget is adding of new needs, so additional needs that we'll go through. Some of those have remained, some have been taken out based on our conversation on May 30th. And then the other positive is that we have, over the years, actually increased our reserves since our conversation last year at this time. And so we'll talk about that. And so what that does is it does provide us a little breathing room. It provides us some more flexibility to how we're going to move forward in addressing this in the short term. So to talk about the CalPERS normal cost and unfunded liability, we showed this chart on May 30th. Essentially in 2022-23 and 23-24, we remained fairly flat in terms of what our funding to CalPERS was to address this. This current year, we received information from CalPERS that we needed to increase that fairly dramatically, and you can see here on the chart almost to $2.5 million. That increase is due to an increase both in the across the board for those that are not in public safety contracts, but also the non-public safety, and those are in PEPRA. So you see that purple bar there. In normal years, it's very minimal in terms of how much is going into there for PEPRA employees, but there is a little bit that's coming in now because of the investment strategy. So this is one area we're going to be taking a look at next year, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. I talked a little bit about police and fire contracts increasing. I shaded out the history, but you can kind of see where we started from early on in 2013, 2014 to where we are today. Let's look at the blue lines on the last two. So the increase from 5.3 million to 6.2 million is what we're seeing in our current year contract. So that's something that we have to make up in the general fund as our general fund budget. And that decrease from 6.7 to 6.5 represents the addition of Measure H revenue coming in to help offset some of those costs of that contract. It should be noted, though, this only represents 3/4 of a year of revenue from Measure H. We don't anticipate revenue coming in until the second quarter. Next year, we'll have all 4 quarters, or the following year, we'll have all 4 quarters of revenue. The additional budget request, we held all the one-time funding request that we talked about on May 30th. Policies regarding our housing, some housing policies for second home policies, inclusionary housing, SB 433. We've also maintained the tree inventory, canopy analysis, and urban forestry management plan items. As we mentioned before, those 3 items related to trees, there is a current application out for a grant to cover those costs. If we're able to get that grant, that'll help offset this cost, and we won't be taking that from the general fund. If we don't get that grant, we'll need to evaluate with. And I'll talk about those 2 in a minute. One was the sustainability coordinator, and one the ongoing rebate programs that were recommended by the Climate Commission. But we did add a plaza sustainability plan that was based on recommendation on May 30th to address the issues on the plaza, particularly making sure that we're managing our infrastructure, the trees, and everything in a way that is sustainable going long term. So we both address our economic driver of our city, the core of our city, maintain our tree canopy and the trees that we do have on our plaza. We maintain the contract services for planning, engineering, and stormwater. Those are offset by revenue from fees, so those do have a slight offset moving forward. And there were some additional fire requests that came in through the year that are in the budget through various funding sources, either through vehicle replacement or equipment replacement funds. And then any delta there that isn't covered by those would be picked up by the general fund. So those are listed here as well. Those have not changed since May 30th. The other changes I mentioned on the positive side is that our reserve level has increased. So back when we presented this budget to you last year, we were looking at about a $4.2 million in unrestricted reserves above what our current reserve policy states. So the 4.3 in the yellow is our 70% of annual operating cost, which we need to maintain. The additional 1.5 is another policy in place for emergency, to have that in place for emergency. Anything above that we consider unrestricted reserves that can be used if needed at the discretion of the council. Through the year, for a variety of reasons, through unfilled positions, through not spending completely on projects or what we projected to be spending, currently, essentially as of today, we have $13.3 million in our reserves, which means there's about $7.5 million of unrestricted reserves. So that is a good sign that we're not dipping into the reserves every year to address our deficit. We anticipated we would need about 1.2 last year of reserves, and we didn't need to spend that much. So essentially what it did is it grew our reserves. Where we don't want to be is in every year we just reduce our reserves ongoing. That's not sustainable, and so that's something I think you'll see in this next slide, why we need to be careful about that. But in this current year, we're in a position where we can pass a budget with our current reserve levels and still have enough reserves to feel comfortable to come up with a strategy moving forward long term. So before we get into the long-term budget and kind of where we are, I want to go over the income sources and where the money's going. So you've seen these slides before. Most of our revenue comes from TOT, property tax and sales tax. And as I mentioned before, if you combine the measure V, which is our local half-cent sales tax, with our existing sales tax, that essentially rivals or almost exceeds the TOT. The TOT is a big driver in our as well. Sales tax and TOTs, you heard before, are more volatile than property tax. So property tax is pretty stable, but the top three are those three that we keep an eye on and are critical in our economic development efforts to make sure that we sustain those levels as we move forward. Today we're talking primarily about the general fund, and so you're hearing a lot about the general fund reserves, general fund levels, deficit. There are more funds that we manage within the city. Overall, we have a budget of $47 million, just over $47 million. But the general fund that we're talking about today is the $27 million. And so in the next slide, when we look at revenue versus expenses, we're only talking about the general fund. So we wanted to put this slide up here just to remind the council and the public that there are other funds, enterprise funds, such as the water fund, cemetery fund, that are considered enterprise. Those funds stay within that bucket and can only be used for that type of service. And then we also have debt service funds and other things that are restricted for certain uses, which is why we don't include those in this conversation when we talk about expenditures. All this detail of these funds will be included in the budget book and included in the packet. There's more information in the packet about the levels of these funds. So where does the money go? The revenue on the general fund side primarily go to public safety, police and fire, our operations, and the various departments. Those police and fire numbers you may see are a little bit bigger than the contract amounts that I showed you earlier of the 6.9 and others. And the reason for that is that we have a contract with police and fire, but we also have a general fund account for police and fire that we use to pay for vehicles, or not vehicles, but necessarily, but other things such as the 3 additional firefighters, for example. Those weren't in the contract, so we would pay those separately out of a separate fire general fund. So this accounts for all cost impacts for police and fire within the general fund, both the contract but also other expenses that we have to pay that are outside of those contracts. In this chart here, it just provides more detail in terms of what the budget was in previous years, the change in those budgets, and as we went through in much more detail on May 30th during the study session. And this is the slide I think that we want to highlight. This is important to see. So our revenues of $24.2 million is what we're projecting based on everything you heard earlier in terms of sales tax projections, TOT projections, property sales, and our expenditures based on the current budget that we're bringing forward to you today is $27.1 million. So that's a deficit of about $2.8 million that we're presenting to you today. The important part is, though, that this is not a one-time deficit. This is ongoing. So this is a structural deficit because these contracts and other expenses are fixed. They're not going to go down every year, so they're not up and down. It's important to see what a 5-year projection looks like if we were to do nothing, if we were to continue to spend as we're spending, if we were to continue to have contract increases moving forward, we would have a structural deficit moving forward. And if you took the amount of reserves that we have, the unrestricted reserves we had, and tried to fill the gap every year to fill this, we would be out of reserves by the end of this 5-year. So that's not a sustainable way to move forward and to use reserves each year. So this is where we're starting from, and I think this is the important conversation we need to have today. And if we approve this budget today, that we need to take steps immediately to start working on this deficit moving forward so that we can close that gap. So we told you on May 30th that we were going to do these things. We were going to get feedback from you all in terms of your priorities and what you want to see move forward. We want to look at our department budgets and refine those, which we've done a little bit of. Delay some capital improvement projects, look at one-time expenditures and use reserves for that, and then also evaluate a potential revenue measure for November 2024. So after May 30th, we went back and looked at the budget and did a lot of work. Again, I have to give credit to the finance team, Ryan and Propti and Steve and his team. Went through every line item of the budget to try to figure out if there's things we can move around, pull back into the current year. We were able to do a couple things. And two things I talked about earlier is that we've removed ongoing expenses, again, related to the structural deficit is really impacted by adding ongoing expenses. And so we removed the climate manager position, and we'll review that. I do want to say that even though we're removing that position from the budget, I will be using consulting funds that we do have in our budget currently over the next 6 months to help us, one, deal with the 1383 requirements that we have that you just heard about in our garbage contract, that we have a current audit that we're underway that we need assistance with, and we'll be evaluating how to move forward with our climate initiatives so that when we discuss at the mid-year, we'll have additional information about what that position might be needed to do and what scope of services it might be needed. So we still have work to do. We're not going to fill a position, but I'll probably use a consultant to help me get through the next 6 months with certain tasks. In addition, we removed the new climate program rebates, and we'll reevaluate that, looking at grants and then looking at where our revenue is at mid-year. We've identified about $400,000 that could be removed from this 24-25 budget by moving things around in our current budget and actually moving projects forward before the end of the fiscal year. And we've removed or delayed $270,000 in capital projects, and we'll reevaluate that again based on income and revenue, and also the ability of us to get grants. So if we're able to get grants for certain things, that'll free up some funds that'll allow us to move other capital projects forward. So, and this is probably the most important slide. So with that deficit, with the structural deficit, with the budget that I'm proposing to you tonight, I feel the responsibility. I need to show you what we're going to do about that and how we're going to move forward. We can't just use the reserves, as I mentioned, and think things are okay. So we do need to do a few things. First is we need to evaluate what our actual sales tax and property tax and TOT are when we get to mid-year to determine, are we on track with our projections? Are things better than we thought? Are they worse than we thought? And we do need to readjust. And so what this means is that we do have to have an established mid-year check-in. And now with our finance director on board, that's going to be a regular thing we do each year, that we come back to you, look at where we are, evaluate the budget, and make those course corrections. We need to update our unspent funds, so we don't close the books for a few months after the budget, after the end of the fiscal year, and so it takes a few months to get those final numbers to where we can actually make some real hard decisions that based on how we actually close the year. And so we need to report out those numbers. We'll review the revenue and unrestricted fund levels for those positions I just discussed. Another thing we're going to do, and we've actually started already creating the RFP, is to do a fee study for our impact fees for development. So making sure that we're collecting the right fees and the right amount to address infrastructure, housing, and cost recovery for everything that we're doing on the development side. That has to happen quickly and is important to happen. And so Jennifer and her team are working on moving that forward as quick as possible to address this. We also need to evaluate our PERS unfunded liability funding strategies. So there are ways to, other creative ways to address our long-term PERS issues. And so we'll be meeting with PERS. The thought is to bring PERS to you, bring them to a council meeting and have a conversation with PERS about what strategies they've seen work, what strategies are available to cities, and then we can think from a policy standpoint how we want to address the long-term budget impacts as we move forward. We also need to create and update policies and work with the finance committee, specifically around surplus utilization. How do we utilize the surplus, our budget administration policy, and reserve level policy. So that all this will provide guidance to us as we move forward with this deficit on how to spend these reserves, and so that we're all on the same page about how those funds are spent. And then the big item is to bring back to you a ballot measure, a revenue measure potential. So for the November 2024 ballot. So I will bring back on July 17th to the council a proposal to put a sales tax revenue measure on the ballot in November of 2024. We'll go through what that revenue measure could do to the budget. And so I'll take this budget that I prepared for you tonight. I'll show you what that impact of a half-cent sales tax could do to our budget and what that would mean, and how that could address some of our budget issues, but also create capacity to expand services such as Parks and Rec that we've talked about, which is our city goal. And then we also did some polling, so I'll bring that information back as well, some summary of that polling on what the community feels about a revenue measure such as this moving forward. So those are the steps that I plan on taking immediately after tonight as we move forward. And then we'll continue to revise and meet with the Finance Committee on how we move forward throughout the year and then up to the mid-year check-in. I want to just stop here. The rest of the presentation is a summary of what I've went over at the study session, just a quick high-level view of personnel, the community programs. None of that's changed substantially at all. I just want to make sure that the public has a chance to see that one more time. But this is really the area where I think there's some value in having some discussion or feedback for me.
Yeah. All right. Council, any questions, comments for staff at this point?
So
Do
you want to go first?
Oh, you go first.
Okay. No, you go first. No. Okay.
One of you go first.
We'll go. We'll get started. We'll move this along. So I do want to comment. I do appreciate that we are in a position of a structural deficit. I also think that we are also in a position that, even with potential, with a revenue ballot measure, we don't know how that's going to go. There's a lot of revenue ballot measures, ballot measures, whether it's property tax or sales tax or whatever coming on in November. So I think we have to really think about our future although I hope that would go through, I think we have to think about our future without that. So I also, of course, everybody knows how concerned I am about the issues of climate, but I do feel that this is the appropriate way for us to move forward. I think adding on in this, I think it's not responsible when we have a structural deficit to add positions on, because I think that threatens other positions in the city. But I do like this approach. I also believe that the new climate manager position, I'm glad we're not calling it a sustainability, director of sustainability. I think that's a great change. That in particular, I do want us to see, how do we get that work done? I think eventually we will want that position. And I think it's perfectly adequate we use this next 6 months to look at how do we do that. And there are organizations across the country that are focused on climate and that, help these positions or help cities address their climate issues, and for us to really assess what the role of that position is and how that could be funded in other ways too, besides just from our general funds. So I think it's the appropriate way to go. I know that there are many people that won't be happy with that, but I think it's difficult to move ahead when we are facing a structural deficit. And then the climate rebate program, since we don't really know kind of also, that would be ongoing, kind of what that would look like year over year. I think that's for us to assess that later on is appropriate. I'm glad all of the other ones, the one-time ones, are going through, because I think it's important for us to move forward on climate in some way. The only other thing I just want to reinforce, even though I think most of us may be aware of it, but when we're looking at a negative year, and even though we see growth years coming in, I think it's really important for us to look at that forecast, because you can see it takes years to get out of a deficit. Just because we're anticipating there could be increased money coming in from all of those sources in 25, 26, or 24, 25, that, it takes several years for us to get back to where we were. So other than that, I don't have any other questions or comments.
All right, Mr. Dean.
Thank you. Overall, I feel very comfortable and confident for the budget. And first of all, on the expenditures for each year by year. That is just fixed. I look at it, the rate of it increased from previous year to this year, just only 5%. The coincidence that match the inflation rate. That's very simple, right? At least. And also, I'm impressed by Davis and the tools and measures how to control these expenses. You have so many different tools, and also when you estimated the revenue, I saw that you are very, very conservative. Yeah, so that is although right now we have the $2.8 million in the deficit, and also it's good running the city with the deficit. Give you some intense. We cannot, spend money as you like. That is good. And also, when I look at today's deficit, it reminds me of the last year when we do budget for. Also, at that time, we do have $1 million in the budget. Because of this kind of conservative for the budget for finance, and we haven't closed our book yet. But right now, on the bank, we have $13.3 million. Actually, the net and then the income is more than $3 million. So that is our answer to the last year. We don't need to worry about $1 million. Instead, we meet this kind of target, and also we have additional increase our reserve in the fund by $3 million. So the minor concern is how these kind of information, and especially for our income and from the TOT tax and the sales tax, could be more updated without the city and the management. Usually, I know the TOT tax will be 2 months and delayed usually. So I'm wondering if we can, more accurately, estimate our income in this way when the support the total budget let the city run in a deficit. Give us more confidence, not only in our city council, and also let our residents have the more confidence to support.
Yeah, and I think I'm hearing your question being, can we get more timely data in terms of our revenue as it comes in? Unfortunately, property taxes, we're at the mercy of the county in terms of when they provide that information. I think that is probably the longest delay that we have. I think that's is that a
12 to 18 month lag.
Yeah, 12 to 12, yeah.
Valuations.
But that's a pretty steady base. Sales tax is the next one in that. I'm sorry, yeah, sales tax is the next one. That's usually 2 quarters behind, right? So 2 quarters.
Oh, 2 quarters. Oh, wow. That's
so yeah,
from the state.
From the state. So unfortunately, we do have that lag. So I think when we set up our mid-year, I think we should be strategic about when we set that mid-year check-in based on when the latest batch is. But I think, so unfortunately, we are restrained in terms of when we do get data. TOT, we get much, I think we're pretty good about, is it monthly we get TOT, Ryan? A month or two to delay for that. So that's a little bit quicker. We're able to work with hotels. And we also do meet with our local hotels to look at their occupancy rates on a regular basis, so we can get more real-time data about how things are going. So.
All right, yeah. And also it is important, we have a mid-years adjustment. At that time, we have the more information to support us. Thank you.
All right. And anything from my right side of the dais? Mr. Wellander.
I'm curious, and this is just a detail that may be embedded in the big report, but in talking to the public, it's been quite easy to talk about our commitment to fire, police, and our the one that I would love to know if you can extrapolate out is what is our gross payroll for our 44.5 employees? Do we have that number?
It's probably the biggest part of the budget.
1 second.
And that's something that can be sent to me later. It's not going to impact my feelings. I just want to know that information.
Here we go. So, yeah, the personnel cost. We'll put last time, but the personnel cost typically, I mean, this is not a contract amount, so typically the personnel cost is, for 24-25 would be 5.4 million.
Thank you.
That's what's budgeted for 24-25.
And one of the questions I have is, given the kind of the wake-up call with the unfunded actuary liability, it was based upon the CalPERS not meeting the 6.8 target. How do you forecast with that unbelievable variable of not knowing how CalPERS is going to do, to the point where we can continue to make good decisions going forward?
I'll let Steve answer this, but I think that is the discussion we need to have with CalPERS, is to look at those strategies to make sure that we have a more consistent plan moving forward, so we don't get these erratic changes. So, and Steve, you want to talk a little bit about that?
CalPERS issues a valuation for all your plans, and in that valuation there is a 5-year forecast, but that assumes that they're meeting the discount rate of 6.8% on an annual basis. As we know, that can fluctuate from year to year. So that's those estimates are actually in your 5-year forecast, but you just have to take that on a year-by-year basis. When their investments are determined, or the results of their investments, gains or losses are determined, you can update your forecast, and certainly your valuation will be updated at that point, but it's really tough to really predict that with great accuracy.
And didn't you say that the loss was based on 22?
That's right. CalPERS, it takes a couple of years to update the valuation.
Yeah.
No other questions at this point.
Ms. Lowe, anything?
I don't have any questions now.
I have two other quick comments.
Okay.
So one of the things I wanted us to point out as well is, when we look at our priorities, I think the area where I feel like that there's less activity going on in regards to not just what we're deciding here, but conversations and understanding what's going on in commissions and such. But the area of economic development, I think, is an area of our priorities that we really have to, like, how are we focusing on that? How are we really addressing that issue? Then I will say that while I think I have heard many concerns around the fire and police, how much those costs are going up as a percentage of our overall budget, where people think that we, live in a relatively safe community and are concerned with this going up so high when there's so many other things that we need. I'm reflecting these good constituents that have reached out to me. So I think it's important to recognize that those concerns are there, and also that my concern is, if increases continue at the same level that they are at, then that continues to also could be significant structural deficit or add to that. And I would assume that that is being factored into the ongoing forecasting, whatever is in the contracts for fire and police on future increases that are already there. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Also, I would like to, sorry. Yeah,
Mr. Dean.
And also, you just mentioned about the position for the client environment, to manage that position. And I hope in the middle of the year, when you double check on the revenue, and never, minimize the importance for this position. Although this is not for the current need, but it's kind of we make an investment for the future, for our next generation. So we want to keep this in the position.
please.
So, but the actuality is, and while I agree with you, Councilmember Ding, is that there is work that needs to be done that someone in that position would have done that is not getting done and will fall upon others right now. So just so that we're aware, it's not like there are things that have to happen associated with that. So it's not as if other people will be taking up that work. It's not, while we're not filling that position. But there's a plan to move that forward, as our city manager stated, so that work will continue, and it'll come out of, budget for consultants. So that will continue until we're able to make that decision.
All right. I'm hearing no other discussion or questions. We'll open it to the public for, I'm sorry.
I'll just, if you don't
Oh,
mind,
you
Mayor,
need
I'll
to
just finish
continue.
the
That's
presentation,
correct.
and then we can go to public.
My,
comment.
how we forget.
And it's okay, and I'll just touch on the fact that economic development, as you mentioned, is a priority for us, and as part of this budget, you'll see in the list of contracts and agreements, there's an agreement with the Sonoma Chamber, the Chamber of Commerce, who provides that economic development arm for us to works with us. So Jennifer and I have sat down with them, looked at their scope of work. Once this budget's passed, we'll be meeting with them to get going on some of those efforts and moving forward. And I think what I'm also hearing is we need more output in terms of what is going on, what we're doing, and get feedback from you all, but our boards and commissions as well. So we'll work with the Chamber on that. So moving forward, personnel, just real quickly, no change in the budget, no additional positions being added. I did note that in mid-year we did add one position. That was the cemetery manager. That individual we have identified, selected, and made an offer, and they will be starting on July 1st. And so I'm looking forward to introducing you to that individual. We're excited to have them on board. And we'll talk about how that position, once she's on board, we'll talk about what that role is to generate revenue, start to get the cemeteries up and running and generating the revenue they need to be sustainable and not have a negative impact on the general fund going forward. I showed this chart in May 30th of our org chart, and since then we've filled in some of these blocks. So this shows vacant positions and filled positions. All these positions are currently on the books. So anything that is not solid is currently vacant, but under either a consultant is helping us with, or we're under recruitment to fill those positions. We talked about our Recreation and Community Fund program. We took a slightly different approach this year on this program. Per our policy, we have two pieces of this fund. 90% of it goes to community services, heritage, and community events, and then there's 10% of discretionary funding. What we did is we realized we had additional funds left over on that 90% every year, and it didn't go to those community events, and they haven't been updated in quite some time. So we went through and identified potential proposed increases to those agreements with additional requirements and requests for services from those. For example, the community services helping us with our exhibits and maintaining things that are going on here. So we're incorporating them more into our day-to-day operations. We did take a very different approach on the discretionary funds this year. As we've talked about before, we put a call out for use of those that are interested in those funds, and we limited it to $3,000, and we received a number of inquiries for people that wanted to participate in this new program as a pilot this year. So we'll see how it goes this year and evaluate that and see if you want to continue this next year. We received 20 requests and for $47,000, and those are programs that service individuals throughout the valley, not just in the city limits, but throughout the valley in a number of different areas. And that includes arts programs, events, and other things. So the full list of those programs that we're recommending be funded is in the packet, and you actually have a separate resolution for that. It identifies the name of the program, the entity that's providing it, the number of people, the little description of the program, and the number of people that it would be served by that program. So that's in your packet. We're also continuing our homeless funding, as we mentioned before, $50,000 to day services through HAS, or Homeless Action Sonoma. We also are providing $100,000 for case management services through HAS as well. $50,000 for SOS, Sonoma Overnight Support, to provide meals through the valley. And then also working on using our Measure O funding from the county to support the by names list program manager, which has a value of about $94,000. In that position, we're sharing with Petaluma. And so this is a summary of that amount. So $200,000 of general fund is going to our homeless services this year. And we have a number of contracts. So because we are a small city and we have a small team in the city here, we do work with providers, contract providers, the Visitors Bureau. I mentioned the Chamber of Commerce as well. What this does is allows us to re-enter these contracts. A lot of these contracts were in place and were in place for 3 years. They all expired this year. They all expired July 1. So I am requesting that authorization to allocate these funds to these contracts, but also authorizing me to enter into contracts with these individual groups one by one. And what we're doing is going through each of these contracts, updating the language, putting in new legal language, putting in the right stuff that hasn't been there for a number of years. So all these will be updated by the time they're signed by me. So we have the Ecology Center in here, the Sonoma County Transportation, which was discussed earlier, in terms of that going up slightly in terms of cost. We talked about the homeless services. We have emergency preparedness in here as well. Sonoma Valley Communications, that's the organization that broadcasts our community meetings on TV and on our website. Robert Smith, who does our code enforcement, and then our auditing services. And then we have a number of recreation and community services that we've talked about, showed on other slides, which is the Boys and Girls Club, the Community Center, Ecology Center, Vintage House, Field of Dreams, and Sonoma Valley Health and Recreation Association, which is Sonoma Splash, the pool that we work with the school district and the nonprofit, which the mayor and I were able to go out there last week and go visit.
He won.
We've seen the photos.
Oh, yeah. We do, in addition to the number of contracts that we have in place, we have a capital improvement program that you will be acting on tonight as well. This is the same list that was provided to you on May 30th, with the exception of the programs that were removed. So we did remove the facilities programs out of this list for now, and the rest of these are as presented on May 30th. So a lot of these use a variety of funding sources, both general fund, and so general fund is really what we're acting on today, but there are allocations through various sources, Quimby, Parks Measures, and others. We have gas tax measures for roads and street programs, and also Transportation Measure M funding that comes in. And then we also use general fund to match to get other grants. So for example, the citywide roadway safety improvement projects that Go Sonoma is a match that is used to get additional funding from the county to do safety improvement programs. So that's why you see those numbers and why those are fairly small numbers in the scheme of things. And then our creeks, drainage, and water projects that we presented to you earlier this year. One change is that we did remove. Oh, it's in here. I'm sorry. Never mind. This is what was presented. So the next step is to produce the budget book, and I think you all remember that last year. It's a fairly hefty book, but it includes detailed on every account, every line item, so it's a good resource for you throughout the year to go back to. It also provides a description of what each fund is and what its intent is and what it's for. We will also post that budget book online for the public, so the public has access to that information. I will be bringing you a revenue measure option for consideration on July 17th for your review. We'll review mid-year. That date on the mid-year meeting will be set with the Finance Committee, and again, we'll look strategically at when to do that based on when we have the latest information on revenue numbers. And then we're going to continue to work with the Finance Committee on policies and changes. So we're going to hopefully put that committee to work this year to try to help us get some of these things moving. And now with our new finance director on board, we're going to move some of these programs forward in an expedited fashion. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions. We do have 5 resolutions in front of you today, and we do need to act on them each individually. And if you have any questions before we act on these, I'm happy to do that, and the team is here as well.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any questions from the council regarding the second half of the presentation? Mr. Wellander?
Real quick on personnel, I did not recognize who our development services supervisor is that's filled in. Jade? Jade. Thank you.
Ms. Farrar-Rivas?
Yeah, so on slide 30, that was my only comment. I really like that slide. It's really nice to see what we still have open. It's a question that comes up, but it would be good just to have one more shaded ones of the ones that we've just recently filled, so that we go, oh yeah, so we are, because the reality is we are moving ahead and we have filled a number of positions. So, and then slide 37. Oh, slide 37. So, what I was, okay, so I will do my disclaimer. I am on the board of the Sonoma Ecology Center. I'm actually the vice chair of the board of the Sonoma Ecology Center. But it's my understanding that I can comment on Sonoma Ecology Center because I'm not receiving any kind of remuneration from them in any way.
Yeah, that's a good point. If any council members are non-compensated board members of any of the community partners that are listed for agreements tonight, you should be able to vote on those and participate because they are engaged in activities to support the city. But you do need to make the disclosure, and that disclosure needs to be noted in the minutes. So that may apply to Councilmember Ding with respect to the Sonoma Oversight Support, and it sounds like it does with respect to the Sonoma Ecology Center for Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Yes, yes. So, so what I was at, whether or not, I was just curious as to whether or not these 420, 425, are these the exact amounts for the public works? I'm concerned with the public works contracts. For the maintenance of Montini Preserve and also for the Nathanson Oxbow. Are those reflected correctly? And has there been any need, and not just for them, but some of these are other vendors that provide services through us that are different than the community services that they're providing, that has not been an increase? Are we anticipating, these are one-year agreements, that there's going to be an increase in those?
Yeah, these are the current dollar amounts that we've talked with each individual about. And so we have not increased some of them. For example, the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce are staying flat. And we've had those conversations with them. I, off the top of my head, don't know specifically about the Ecology Center if those have changed. Or if they're, well, but yeah, so this is what we'll be working with them on, and if there's any change or they do want to increase those, we'll need to come back, and I'll have to come back to council and make that adjustment.
All right.
If it's different than what you're authorizing for me tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I believe, I'm just looking at the markup of the Ecology Center, and it provides that the amount can vary from year to year as determined by the council and its discretion, so those may change during the 3 years.
All right. Anything else for staff? Seeing none, public comment on this? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council. Since everybody else gets to talk so much, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you to the city manager and his staff and consultant for the work on this. I'm somewhat of a fiscal conservative, and it pains me, quite honestly, to think about dipping into $2.8 million of reserve. What I would like to do, I see the necessity of it, and I think I even spoke in the workshop about recognizing the emergency nature of some of these big increases that we're faced with. I would like to encourage the consideration of maybe quarterly updates for the council as a whole, and certainly as part of the finance committee, I would look forward to sitting down on a monthly basis with staff and just watching this very closely in terms of how we progress. And I certainly hope that your office, Mr. Guin, can expand that reserve dollar amount like you did last year. So I'm not sure what magic you were using, but keep that up. I think that's going to be very important. Ms. Lowe.
So I just want to say that I support all of these actions. I told the city manager I have a sort of a hard stop at 8:30, so I apologize for leaving early. I have children that I'm minding, and right now they're on their own, sort of. So I have to go take care of them. But I just want to say that I do support all of these resolutions, and I echo the mayor's comments regarding how much work was done on this. And I particularly want to note that these little $3,000 grants mean so much to those nonprofits out there. I want to just put a pin in one of them because it's my personal thing. But this year, the Artist of the Year, I think the treasure we call it, was dance. And the Sonoma Conservatory gave scholarships to a lot of these dancers that was learning in the schools to come and take actually, their professional classes at the studio, and that those $3,000 that they're going to be awarded will allow those kids who are so, excited by what they're learning, at El Verano and whatever, to be able to come over and get their leotards, tights, and shoes and get some really good professional dance training. And I think that's just an amazing thing that we're able, it's not a lot, but it really shows the heart that we have in the city and how we're really, and although the studio is in the city limits, the kids can come from anywhere. So I just want to thank everyone on that. I think that those $3,000 grants will mean a lot, and to those kids and to all those nonprofits. And I also, of course, will look forward to the actions regarding the sales tax. But at this point, I hate to speak and run, but I got a little 5-year-old I got to pick up.
For a vote in case.
No,
we get there.
you'll call me back.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ding?
I would want to know these 5 the resolutions, we need to one by one, or, okay, all right. And before we close, also, I would like to remind everyone, and we do have the deficit, but we spend a lot of the money, those the unexpected expenses, for example, and homeless issues. This is the second year we spend so much money. And last year we had 260,000. This year is 300. That is in the city's history. This is the first time. And during the past decades, the city just only support $30,000 for the homeless. So we can see we did a lot of the good thing, especially in the long term. Not only within the city limits, also and beyond city limits. For example, all homeless, and we take care and whole valleys. Another thing is before the vote, I would like to disclose I'm the board member of SOS. According to FPPC and the decision, I'm allowed to discuss and make the decision between the city and SOS. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank
If I
you.
may, Councilmember Ding, are you also a non-compensated board member of the Sonoma Valley Communications, the radio?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so that would also be included,
Oh,
in your
included.
disclosure.
Okay. Yes. Mhm.
And we'd ask the city clerk to reflect that in the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, do you want all disclosures at this point, or wait
Sure.
until we get to that resolution? Okay.
While we're
Any
on
other
this-
disclosures?
You already disclosed. Yeah. Okay.
All right, and I have a disclosure. I'm on the Board of Trustees for Hannah Center, and they have one of these small grants, $3,000 grants in here. And yes, I receive no compensation from anybody. Maybe I'll get $3,000, I don't know. Anyway, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adopt this budget?
I will start in the first one and the rest
No,
of them
excuse
one by
me.
one.
No,
Yeah, hang on, Mr.
We're
Wellander.
still on discussion, are we not? Are we moving quickly?
Mr. Wellander,
I have comments.
discuss.
I will be happy to. I too was questioning whether or not it would be appropriate to have more intermediate reviews, and I fully support the mayor's suggestion of quarterly updates. I think that's critical. I also would love, and again, maybe it will align with a quarterly update, but I would love to know, once you can close out 23, 24, what that residual may or may not have been and how that might impact. I also, this is a sidebar, but it's related. I'm very anxious for all effort to be put forth to fill all positions, because I think it would be much more comforting to know that we've got a complete staff moving forward in this difficult period. And I too will echo some concerns when we look at that 5-year projection. This is just a trajectory of deficit spending for the next 5 years, so I want us to move forward cautiously. Having said that, I want to add a little bit more information. I believe that I would like to strongly encourage we establish more funding for the plaza. And right now, you may or may not realize that one of the concerns that came from that elm tree investigation was that we are practicing very poor horticultural practices in that we are spraying all the existing trees with irrigation. And that just facilitates or subjects or makes it more vulnerable to downwind problems or downstream problems, significant ones. So the magnitude of what we need to be doing for terms of sustainability is to really revisit and basically come up with a new efficient irrigation system that does not throw onto the trees. Plus, we're so good at encouraging our residents to be good water users. We're not good water users. So and so what we're talking about is we're talking about a significant chunk of money, and I recognize that more than likely it will have to be phased, but we need a roadmap. And I think that the $50,000 is insufficient. So I would strongly suggest, in terms of some of the other monies allocated to parks, that we look closely. I think that if Quimby money can be used legally, then I think we really should, we're talking about the most significant green space in our city. And that needs to be a priority. So I would strongly suggest that. I also just want to speak to regarding the trees on that one line item that we had identified for inventory, et cetera, that not only be executed if we are given the grant, and that we don't move into the data realm out of the general fund, unless it can be definitively demonstrated that we will be significantly losing out on future grants. So if we do anything with what monies we have, I would prefer not data, I would prefer actually planting trees. And probably the last one, and it was kind of breezed over, but I'm going to go back to saying that our budget needs to reflect our goals and priorities. And I would strongly like to suggest for comment that we defer any energy directed to annexation for this coming year for a number of reasons. I think that because we don't have full staff, we have a lot on our plate. We have a lot that we need to be addressing, including the various fee studies and the concerns on revenue generation, that I'm not saying drop it, I'm just saying let's defer it, because I think if you take an honest look at what we're doing for this budget, we're doing what was the second word in that goal, and that was unification. If you look at all the grants that we are passing on, these are significantly supporting not just Sonoma, but all Valley. Councilman Ding already mentioned the significant investment for the homeless. That's whole Valley. And so I think it's important that we stay truly focused on our concerns about the budget and how we can best spend it. Because again, when we look at the forecast of the next 5 years, and I see that click of a $2 million deficit, as it's currently shown, recognizing that there's an asterisk there that's saying it is speculative, it's not for sure. But that's one thing I just wanted to throw out there for consideration. And I believe, just check my notes. That concludes my comments and questions.
Okay. So we need to address 5 resolutions that are proposed.
Mayor, can I take the first one?
Mr. Ding, you can take number 1.
All right. I'd like to move to approve the resolution of the City Council of the City of the Sonoma and successor agency of the former Sonoma Community Development Agency adopting fiscal year 2024 to 25 City of the Sonoma operating the budget, approving the community to fund the programming, and authorizing the city manager or an designee to execute task orders for the city engineering services with the CIP consultants.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a
I
second?
will second that.
We have a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Aye.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
Okay, we have a second resolution. Anybody care to make a motion?
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, please.
I move to accept the resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma adopting the 2024 to 29 5-year capital improvement program and authorizing capital project funds appropriated and unspent in fiscal year 2023-24 to be rolled into fiscal year 24-25 budget.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, and roll call.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
All right. We have resolution number 3. I'll do this one. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the city manager to execute or amend contracts with various service providers within such areas as economic development, recreation, community services, public works and transportation, emergency preparedness, and homeless support. General operations services for the fiscal year 2024 to 25. That's a motion.
I second that.
We have a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
We have a 4th resolution.
I'm happy to move the resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the city manager to approve the carry-forward operational funds for one-time projects appropriated and unspent in fiscal year 2023-24 to be rolled into the fiscal year 24-25 budget.
I second.
Okay, motion and second. Roll call.
Councilmember Dean.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
And we have one last resolution. Would Mr. Wellander like to make a motion? You don't have to.
Sure. I would like, so I make a motion for a resolution of the City Council of the City of Sonoma authorizing the city manager to fund recreation and community service discretionary funding program for the fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
I second.
All right, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ding.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Farrar-Rivas.
Aye.
Councilmember Wellander.
Yes.
Mayor Gurney.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 401.
All right, and thank you, everyone. That concludes that item. And now we are at item number 10 on the agenda, second comments from the public. At this time, members from the public who did not have the opportunity to speak during the early comment period may address the council on matters not listed on the agenda, but which are within the subject matter. Okay. Good evening.
Thank you, David Eicher. And as Councilmember Lowe mentioned earlier, today is Juneteenth, a federal holiday to celebrate the freeing of the last slaves in 1865. But I can see the city of Sonoma is all here working, and I strongly would suggest that for next year, that the city also deem that a holiday for the city of Sonoma. So, so I want you to think about that. As you can see, I didn't make it here the first time because I was the 11th person. And I purposely wanted to wait to get everybody else opportunity, because by having only 10 to begin with, and then the rest later, that discourages people from showing up and speaking. It discourages me, because I know that if I was that 10th person, that 11th person couldn't have spoken. They would have left. I had time today that I could wait. But some people might not be able to wait, like Councilmember Lowe. Could be a parent that has to go home to feed the children. Could be a student and has to study. So I think you really should reconsider that and allow all the comments up to the front. And as Councilmember Wellander may remember, in 2017, the City Council used to have 2 public comment periods, one at the beginning and one at the end, and it wasn't restricted to how many people. But there was a problem in 2017. I think it was a Planning Commission meeting when you were there, not sure. And I think it was a hillside development where the developer came up and asked for a reconsideration, and because of that, at the end of the meeting, on purpose, some Brown Act violations took place. And I see my time is up.
All right, thank you. All right, with that, we will adjourn tonight's meeting.